So today we're going to go over creating parametric families, creating parameters and locking things in place so that when you use something in a project, you can use it over and over again and adjust it kind of on the fly, so it's kind of adaptable, and you can use it in multiple instances as opposed to you create one kind of static thing, and then when you put it in, you've got to constantly come into the family editor and edit it over and over again. So we're going to create a window because a window kind of goes through most of the things that that I really want to kind of touch on here. So we're going to create kind of a basic window family. It'll have button bars and that sort of thing, so we can use equations and all of that sort of good stuff. So if I go up here and hit New, Family, and then come down and find Window and open that up, this is what you get. So they have built in a center line, a left and a right edge, and then they've also got a width parameter. And then if you go to an exterior and interior view, you'll see they have a height parameter, and then they have a default sill height. And all of those adjust the opening, and they adjust things up and down and side to side and all of that sort of stuff. So if I come up here, this little icon up here in the top left under family types, it'll show you all of the parameters that are built into this already. So there's the height, there's the width, there's the default sill height, and I can come in here and change these, and it'll adjust this whole family here. So I'm going to leave them where they are for right now. And we're just going to create a sweep here. I'm not going to worry about doing a sill or anything like that. Obviously, you can build this however you really want, but for purposes of showing parameters and family creation, I'm going to kind of come in here and do something simple. So I'm going to draw my path, and you can lock things into place after you've created something, or you can lock them into place kind of as you're sketching things. I prefer to lock things into place while I'm sketching things, because if I do it after the fact, then I've got dimensions that are all over the place. I'd rather have the dimensions embedded within the item itself. So I'm going to create a dimension line, and I'm going to grab that sketch line and the top of this, and then I'm going to lock that into place. Sometimes these are required, sometimes they aren't, but I would much rather just have them in there than not, so I know that all of this is locked in place. And basically what this does is, if I put a 0-foot dimension line on this and then lock it into place, that is telling this family that if I change the height or the width, that this line has to stay 0'0" away from this this plane line here, this dotted green line. So that way, as I adjust my height and width parameters and then my default sill height parameter, this is all going to move with it, because it has to keep these 0'0" dimensions consistent, since those are locked. So I will finish that, and then I'm going to edit my profile and go to the left view. Okay, so then I'm going to draw just a really generic sash and frame here. So just a really basic frame, and I don't really need to dimension much on this one, because this is already locked into place based on the path that we created. However, I can dimension this to the outside of the wall here and lock that in place, and then dimension this to the inside of the wall and lock that into place. And that should keep everything basically where it wants to be. So if I get a wall that's much thicker than this, these will jump, and we won't end up with this kind of smaller frame inside a much larger wall. You're going to end up putting extension jam and stuff like that on there on the inside anyway. So this is kind of locked in place on where the center line of the wall is, and then this will adjust this back and forth. So once I've got those locked in place, I'll hit my check mark, and that creates my little frame here. So that gives us a decent start to this. And then we'll put our piece of glass in. So if I put my glass in here, and I'm just going to make, we'll say 1/4 inch, hit the check mark. Now I'm going to turn this work plane off and go into my plan here so I can see where this is, and then I can move this into place. Let's say I just put this in the center here. Not the most accurate family in the world, but it'll work for our purposes here. And then I'm going to grab these two here and lock these into place. That way it keeps that right where it needs to be there. And one thing I did forget to do, if I go back into my extrusion here, I need to keep these where they are. And notice how it looks like I'm highlighting that line, but see how it says sweep reference? So that is not my sketch line. So I'm going to hit tab. So sweep reference, tab, now sketch line reference. So I can grab that, and I'm going to lock this in place. That way my glass moves with everything as well. There we go. So now, before I get too far along, I want to test this out and make sure that my basics are pretty much covered here. So I'm going to come up to my parameters, my family types window here, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to change it a few times. I want to make sure that everything's working no matter what I do. So we'll make it 2 foot in height, and let's say we make this like a 4 foot width. If I hit apply, okay, so everything seemed to move. I don't really have any issues here. If we didn't lock things into place correctly, I might end up with a line running down through here where my glass stayed where it was, or my frame stayed where it was, and the opening changed, but the actual window itself did not change. And I like to go bigger and smaller than what it originally was. That way I can make sure that everything's going to work both directions. And then let's change this to 2 foot and see how that works. Okay, so that seems to be working just fine. And then I'll just go ahead and put everything back to where it was. Okay, so now we're going to make a mullions, a set of not mullions, a set of mutton bars. That way we can kind of turn those on and off within this window. That way if we want grids, we can. If we don't want grids, we can turn that off as well. And the amount of them we can set as something that we can adjust back and forth. So the way that you can do this is we're going to do a nested family for this. So I'm going to come up here and hit new family. And I'm just going to make this a generic model. So I'm going to be looking for, there's generic model. So I'll hit OK, and this opens this up. So I'm just going to create a little extrusion here. We'll make these 3/4 of an inch wide. Doesn't really matter how big I make them. And then I'm going to center this on this entire thing. So let's make sure that this is all locked in place on the center there. So I'm good that direction. And then this will be, we'll make these like a 1/2 inch deep. Oops. Okay, there we go. And so I'll hit that, and then I want to go to the front and back. I'm going to uncheck that, and then I'm going to move this down so that I am centered on all of that as well. Okay, so now that I have that, what I am going to do is I'm going to create a model line on this, and I'm going to create an invisible model line that runs right down the middle of this family here. The reason for that I'll show here in a minute, but that'll help us here in when we put this into our actual window. So now that I have this thing, I'm going to select this, And I'm going to apply a parameter here to this material. So I'm going to select this little icon all the way to the right. If I select in here and select this, I can apply a material to it, but that's not going to make it so that I can change that material easily when I get the window into a project. So I'm going to hit this little icon here, hit add parameter, and I'm going to, we'll make it a type parameter. So then we'll say muttons. And it's under a materials and finishes parameter, which is fine. I'll hit OK, OK. One other thing before we get out of this, we're going to make another invisible model line directly across the middle this direction. So I've got one this way and one this way. I get a little crosshatch going across there. So now that I have this, I'm going to save this family, and I'll just save it to my desktop, and we'll say muttons. And then I am actually going to apply a parameter here. Let's go from there all the way down to here. And okay, so I need to apply a height parameter to this. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab this dimension line, and up here under label, I'm going to hit add parameter. So once I've added this parameter, and I'm going to make this an instance because I may want to adjust this a little bit later, depending on what mutton I'm working with there. So I'm going to call this mutton length. I'll say OK. Check the box, and then hit load into project. So now I have this in my project here, and I'm going to place it, and then I will go left, and let's rotate this. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to edit this, and it's not going to let me rotate it because of the way that I made it in here, so I'm actually going to rotate it in my family here. So I will rotate this and go vertical with it. There we go. So now I have something that direction, and we'll make another invisible model line vertical here for us to work with. Okay, now let's load this into. There we go. Okay, so now if I take this and I can grab my center, you see the invisible lines that I can snap to now? They aren't going to show up in the model, but they give me something to grab to and something to dimension to. So now I'm going to just place this perfectly in the middle here, and I'm going to dimension off of that center line there. So let's see if we can find, there it is. So I'll grab this, and I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to make that an equal dimension parameter. So it'll lock this into place so that it's always in the center there, and it's not going to move. I'm also going to grab the edge here and see, okay, so we've got 2 inches at the top and the bottom, and I'm going to make a parameter, so this mutton length, I'm going to come in and add a parameter to, and I'm going to change this to be, so I've got, let's see, where are we at here? Okay, I'm going to grab this and add a parameter, and then add a new mutton length parameter to it, and we'll make that an instance, and we'll say OK. So now that we have this mutton length parameter, I'm going to move this so that this is centered on there as well. And we're going to work with it this direction first, and then we'll go from there. So now if I come up to here, I've got this mutton length parameter. Now I don't want it to be 3 feet. I want it to jump all the way up to this this sash here and here. So what is that dimension? I want that to be here, but at the same time, when I adjust my height and my width, I need that distance to change as well. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to enter a formula here. So our mutton length is actually going to be our height parameter. So I'm going to type in height minus, and then we've got the 2 inches at the top, the 2 inches at the bottom, so minus 4 inches. If I subtract the 4 inches, since this is locked in place in the middle, it's going to take 2 off the top, 2 off the bottom to keep everything centered. And then if I hit enter, it changes that from 3 feet to 3 feet 8. So it's taking the 4 foot and subtracting 4 inches off of it. Now if I hit apply, for whatever reason, that jumped that all the way up there. Oh, okay. So this is kind of, you're seeing the process of creating something. You got to kind of constantly work back and forth with it. So what I didn't do is I did not actually lock my invisible lines in place to be equal that direction and that direction. Okay, we won't worry about that one. So we'll load this into place, override. Okay, now what is keeping that from? Okay, so there's my invisible line. Now I've got this locked into place to the edges of my extrusion. So those should be equal. I've got one there, so I'm okay there. And then let's see if I need to dimension one in this direction. Let's get one this way. So we're okay there. Let's lock these into place. And when you get this little portion that says locking this dimension would over constrain the sketch, that just means like if you lock these in place, the thing is not going to be able to move basically at all. So you end up just kind of leaving that alone with it. So let's try loading this into place here. Okay. So I've got this dimension that's keeping that there, and for whatever reason it's working that direction, but it's not working the other way. So what if I lock the top? Let's move this there, and we're going to remove that constraint. And I'm just going to lock the very top of this to there and make that 0. So now if I adjust this, let's say I adjust my height to 6 feet. I say OK. That seems to move pretty well. And let's see if I change my sill height to 1 foot. It all moves. Okay, so that works as well. So we'll go ahead and stick with that one that way. You could do it either way. For whatever reason, my invisible line in the middle is not staying where it should. It's not staying in the middle of this entire extrusion. So when this increased in height, it didn't want to stay centered on the entire thing. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case, but for whatever reason, we've got another way here to solve that issue. Okay, so now we want to kind of array this thing back and forth across here. So what we're going to do is create an array, and I'm going to move this off to the side here because we're going to array it across and go from there. So I'm going to hit the array button, and I will take this, and I'm going from the first one to the second one. So what's the distance between this and the second one? So it doesn't really matter what I put in now. So let's say I do like 3 of these. And I have my little parameters down here. So I can grab the parameters button, or this parameters little icon down here that says how many of them are there going to be in the field, and apply a parameter to it. And I'll say number of buttons. and we'll call that number of muttons vertical, because we're going to have horizontals as well. I'll say OK. So now I have that as an option there. Now, I want these to be evenly spaced across here, and I need them to be evenly spaced no matter how many I put in here. So I'm going to put a dimension on the first one, and then I'm going to dimension from that to the second one. Now, the first one, I want to be the same. It's going to be the same regardless of what I do here in terms of spacing, but the second dimension is what's going to apply to every subsequent array piece. It's going to tell it, like, okay, in between each arrayed item, this is the dimension. The one between here and here is just telling it what's the distance from that first arrayed piece to the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a parameter here that is, so this is going to be vertical mutton spacing. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to apply that same one to this one, because I want that to be the same. And you saw it just jumped over because this was 7 inches, so it's making that 7 inches. Now we have to apply something to this that makes this evenly spaced. So I've got vertical mutton spacing here, and it says it's 7 inches, but I'm going to use a formula to define this. And what that formula is going to be is, in parentheses, I'm going to say it is the width parameter minus the 4 inches that we've got in terms of our frame on either side, divided by number of muttons. And because this is the space, this is, so if we have 2 muttons, we need to divide that width by the 3 spaces that it creates. So number of muttons plus 1. Oops. Okay, so I have number of muttons vertical. So basically what that told me is I entered something invalid because number of muttons was not a parameter name over here. You have to enter it exactly as that is placed. So now it's telling me 10 and 171, 256 is the spacing for that. So if I hit OK, now it equally spaces those. So let's try this and see if I increase this to, say, 4 and apply. Now they all jump and equally space themselves. So using that formula, we're able to create something that works for us overall here. And I am going to also constrain this second one the same way I constrained the first one, so that all of them are locked into place here. So if I lock that one, now let's try this overall and see how this is going to work. So let's go to 5 feet, and we'll go to 4 foot width. OK. So everything seems to have worked pretty well. Let's get this out of the way here so we can see our family here. OK, so everything is working pretty well. The only issue being that these things are actually sticking out from my window, so I just need to come in and actually move those back into place. But that's not too big of a deal. So I can grab each one of these and move this back into place there. And then I will just dimension the first one and lock it to the glazing, and dimension the second one and lock it to the glazing, and that'll take care of the rest of the array. Okay, so that should work just fine, so we're okay there. Now we just need to do basically the exact same thing horizontal. So we've got this piece. What I'm going to do, because we already have the parameter applied, I'm actually going to go in to our muttons family here, and I'm going to save it as a muttons tooth and load that into play here. and I may need to rotate this whole thing because I don't know if it'll let me. Yep. Okay, so it's not letting me rotate it, so I'm going to come into the actual family itself, grab this, and rotate the entire thing. So now I have what I want, and I can do the exact same thing to this one as I did to the other one. I can come up here, put it into place. I'm going to lock the edge to the side here, and then from there, let's move this down a little bit. From here, I have a mutton length 3 feet, but because I have mutton length already applied to the other one, I'm going to change this one to be mutton length horizontal. I'll hit OK. I'll hit OK. And now come up here and say, okay, mutton length horizontal is defined as the width minus 4 inches. Say OK. And now that jumps to where I want it to be. Now I just need to do the exact same thing with the array. So I will array this, and we'll say there's 3 of them, and we will go from here up like 10 inches. Say OK. I'm going to grab this, add a parameter, number of muttons horizontal. Say OK. Now apply the dimensions that I had before. So I need to find the horizontal portion there. So I'm going to grab that, and there's my invisible line of the other one. Oops. Let's get rid of, I need to get rid of the 1 so that there are 2 separate dimensions. That way I can apply my parameter to them. And then let's create a parameter that is mutton spacing vertical. Spacing vertical. There we go. So now they're all adjusted. Now I just need to define what that is. So mutton spacing vertical is defined as the height minus 4 inches divided by our parameter down here, number of muttons horizontal, divided by, or plus 1. And say OK. And everything should work just fine. The only issue being that my horizontals are sticking out from my window, so I'm going to move those into place. Go to the reference level, grab the edge here, lock that into place. And you just dimension those and lock those into place. And let's create a new project here and see how this works actually within a project. So now that we've got this this piece here, we'll load this into our project. And if I draw a wall across here that I can work with, and create a window. So there's my window. It creates the little void that I've got. If I select it, now I have my sill height options, so I can change my sill height and it'll adjust up and down. All the grayed out ones are ones that are established based on the equations that we created. But if you were to ever want to know what the actual values of those are, you can see right there. Down here is our number of muttons, so I can just come in here and increase that to 6, or I can take this down to 2. and that'll all work. Under edit type, I've got my height and my width, so I can change those to 6. I can change those to 2. Say OK, and everything does not work. So here's where testing things out and moving things around comes into play. So we lock this one into place. We need to lock the other ones into place because it doesn't look like they're moving horizontally as they should. So let's go to the exterior here. So now if I grab the edge of this, so I've got that one in place, but I did not do my second one, which is the problem. So if I grab that and lock that into place, and now load that into the project and override that, now everything jumps to where it should be. That's much better. Okay, so now it looks like everything's working pretty well for us as far as dimensions go, but we also have the issue of absolutely everything is just gray, and we did not apply material parameters to it. So if we go into our edit project and we kind of grab some different things, we can apply material parameters to it. So I can call this, the sash and frame, and then we'll be able to apply whatever material we want to it. We can do the same for the glass and that sort of thing. One other thing that I mentioned that we need to go ahead and do before this family's pretty much done. If I go into edit group and I grab this piece here, I've got a visibility parameter, so I can say call these buttons on off, and I'm going to make that an instance parameter so that depending on the window, maybe we want certain ones to have grids and other ones to not. I'll hit finish, and so all of these should have that parameter applied to them. So yeah, and we'll hit finish. Now I need to do the same for the horizontals. So if I edit the group, grab this one, and I can use the same parameter that I used for the other one for the visibility, and say OK, and finish. And I can load into project and override it. So now when I select this, if I don't want buttons on this window, I can just check this box and they all go away. So I can turn that kind of stuff on and off. I also have my sash and frame material here, so I could click this and decide what you want to make the border, and then it will change that material. We can do the exact same for all the buttons. We can do the same for the glass and everything. So that creates a parametric family that you can use over and over again and adjust on the fly as well in a project. So that's kind of a brief overview of using equations, locking things into place, and creating parameters.